Have you ever made a snap judgment that felt instantly right, only to realize later it was completely wrong? Or have you spent hours, even days, agonizing over a major life decision, meticulously weighing the pros and cons, yet still felt a deep uncertainty about the path you chose? This internal conflict, this constant tug-of-war between gut feeling and rational thought, isn't a personal flaw. It's the fundamental operating system of the human mind. The core problem is that we are largely unaware of how this system works. We navigate our lives believing we are rational actors, when in reality, our choices are constantly being shaped and often distorted by a host of invisible mental shortcuts and deep-seated biases. In a world overflowing with information, misinformation, and endless choices, understanding the inner workings of your own mind is no longer an academic exercise. It's an essential skill for survival and success. It's the key to making better decisions about your finances, your career, your health, and your relationships. This is the profound territory we will explore today. Guided by the groundbreaking work, Thinking, Fast and Slow by Daniel Kahneman. Kahneman, a psychologist who won the Nobel Prize in Economics, is one of the founding fathers of behavioral economics. His decades of research, much of it with his colleague Amos Tversky, have revolutionized our understanding of human judgment and decision-making. He provides us with a language to see and understand the glitches in our own thinking, and in doing so, gives us the power to overcome them. Welcome back to Summary in 15 Minutes, where ideas turn into action and books change lives. Let's dive into the powerful lessons from Thinking, Fast and Slow. Chapter 1. The Two Systems. Your fast brain versus your slow brain. Imagine your mind is a grand stage, and on it a play is constantly unfolding. This play has two main characters who are responsible for everything you think, feel, and do. They work together, but they have vastly different personalities, abilities, and flaws. Understanding these two characters is the first, most crucial step to mastering your own mind. Daniel Kahneman gives them simple names: System 1 and System 2. Let's meet the star of the show, the character who is almost always on stage, System 1. System 1 is your fast thinking. It operates automatically and quickly, with little or no effort and no sense of voluntary control. Think of it as your mind's autopilot. It's the part of you that instinctively turns your head toward a loud sound. It's what allows you to know that 2 + 2 = 4 without having to think about it. It's what helps you understand simple sentences, feel disgust when you see a grotesque image, or drive a car on an empty road. System 1 is a legacy of our evolutionary past, designed to make rapid assessments of situations for survival, friend or foe, threat or opportunity. It creates a constant, effortless stream of impressions, intuitions, intentions, and feelings that are the main sources of the explicit beliefs and deliberate choices made by our second character. System 1 is a master of association and storytelling. It takes disparate pieces of information and seamlessly weaves them into a coherent, believable narrative. If you hear the word eat, your mind will likely, for a brief moment, be primed to complete the word fragment, SOP, as soup. If you had just heard the word shower, you would have been more likely to complete it as soap. This is System 1 at work, a vast, associative machine that links ideas, events, and outcomes. This ability is incredibly powerful. It's the source of what we call skilled intuition. A chess master who glances at a board and instantly sees a winning move. A firefighter who feels a sense of danger, and evacuates a building just before it collapses. These are not acts of magic. They are acts of highly developed pattern recognition, honed by thousands of hours of experience and executed flawlessly by System 1. But this storyteller, this impulsive hero, has a dark side. System 1's primary goal is not to ascertain the absolute truth. Its goal is to create the most coherent and plausible story possible from the information currently available. It has a powerful, what you see is all there is, Wisiati bias. It does not account for the quality or quantity of information it receives. It works only with what's in front of it. This leads it to jump to conclusions. If you meet a person named Ben who is friendly and articulate, your System 1 will quickly construct a narrative that Ben is a good person and likely to be a competent leader, even though you have zero information about his leadership skills. It substitutes the difficult question, is Ben a good leader, with an easier one, do I like Ben? This is a foundational error in our thinking. Furthermore, System 1 cannot be turned off. You can't stop yourself from understanding a simple sentence spoken in your native language. You can't stop your brain from recognizing that one object is farther away than another. You can't unsee an optical illusion, even when you know it's an illusion. It is always running in the background, feeding suggestions to your conscious mind. This brings us to the second character in our play, the one who often thinks he's the director, System 2. System 2 is your slow thinking. It allocates attention to the effortful mental activities that demand it, including complex computations, logical reasoning, and conscious choice. The operations of System 2 are often associated with the subjective experience of agency, choice, and concentration. When you are asked to solve for 17, Cheng 224, that's a job for System 2. When you are parking in a narrow space, consciously monitoring your speed and position, that's System 2. When you are trying to find a specific person in a dense crowd, your pupils dilate, your heart rate increases, and your mind is focused, that is the physical signature of System 2 at work. Think of System 2 as a supporting actor who is often called upon to handle the difficult scenes. It's a powerful and precise tool, capable of following rules, comparing objects on several attributes, and making deliberate choices. It is the only part of your mind that can reason statistically, think critically, and override the impulsive suggestions of System 1. It is the voice of reason, the skeptic within. So, we have the fast, intuitive, and emotional System 1, and the slow, deliberate, and logical System 2. How do they interact? This relationship is the very core of the book. System 1 runs the show by default. It continuously generates suggestions for System 2, impressions, intuitions, and feelings. If endorsed by System 2, these impressions and intuitions turn into beliefs, and impulses turn into voluntary actions. Most of the time, this works beautifully. System 2 is in a comfortable low-effort mode, simply accepting the stream of suggestions from System 1. This is why you can carry on a conversation while walking. Your System 1 is handling the walking and much of the intuitive flow of conversation, leaving your System 2 free to consider more complex points. The problem is that System 2 is lazy. Mental effort, or what psychologists call cognitive load, is costly. Your brain, like the rest of your body, is wired to conserve energy. Engaging System 2 requires burning actual glucose. It's hard work. Because of this, System 2 will take the path of least resistance whenever possible. It often just accepts the plausible stories spun by System 1 without checking the facts. This is the source of so many of our cognitive biases. Kahneman uses a simple puzzle to brilliantly illustrate this dynamic. A bat and a ball cost $1.10 in total. The bat costs $1 more than the ball. How much does the ball cost? For a vast majority of people, an answer immediately springs to mind: 10 cents. This is the intuitive, plausible, and utterly wrong answer from your System 1. It jumps to the conclusion based on a simple but flawed partitioning of the numbers. To arrive at the correct answer, you must actively engage System 2. You have to suppress that initial impulse and do the math. Let X be the cost of the ball. The bat costs X plus $1. Together, the total cost is X plus open parenthesis, X plus $1, close parenthesis. That equals $1.10. This simplifies too. 2x plus $1 equals $1.10. Then 2x equals 10 cents. And finally, x equals 5 cents. The ball costs 5 cents. The people who get this wrong are not unintelligent. Their System 2 was simply lazy. It accepted the easy, intuitive answer from System 1 without performing its critical verification role. This small puzzle is a microcosm of countless decisions we make every day, where we accept the easy answer over the correct one because checking requires effort. This dynamic is governed by the principles of cognitive ease and cognitive strain. System 1 thrives in a state of cognitive ease. When things are familiar, clear, and feel good, we are more likely to believe them. A statement written in a bold, clear font is more likely to be accepted as true than one written in a faint, blurry font. A message that is repeated often starts to feel true, regardless of its actual validity. This is the illusion of truth effect, a powerful tool in advertising and propaganda. Cognitive ease puts us in a good mood, makes us more creative, more intuitive, but also less vigilant and more prone to logical errors. Our System 2 guard is down. Conversely, cognitive strain is anything that makes our minds work harder. Reading a poorly printed text, trying to understand a complex philosophical argument, or even frowning can induce cognitive strain. This strain mobilizes System 2. It makes us more suspicious, more analytical, and less likely to fall for intuitive errors, like the bat and ball problem. We become less comfortable, but our thinking becomes more accurate. This interplay is further complicated by the concept of ego depletion. Willpower and self-control, which are functions of System 2, are a finite resource. If you have to force yourself to eat a healthy salad while staring at a delicious cake, you will have less mental energy left for the next challenge, like solving a difficult logic problem. Studies have shown that people who exert self-control in one task perform worse on a subsequent task that also requires mental effort. This means that when you are tired, hungry, or stressed, your System 2 is depleted. You are literally running low on the mental energy required for self-control and deep thought. In these moments, your impulsive, error-prone System 1 is effectively in charge of your decisions. This is why you should never go grocery shopping when you're hungry, and why crucial decisions should not be made late at night after a long, exhausting day. So, what is the practical lesson here? It's not that System 1 is bad and System 2 is good. That's a dangerous oversimplification. System 1 is a marvel of efficiency that gets us through the day. The problem isn't System 1 itself, but our failure to recognize its limitations and our overconfidence in its judgments. The path to wisdom lies in learning how to manage the collaboration between these two systems. First, recognize the signs of a cognitive minefield. High-stakes decisions, complex problems with lots of variables, and situations that are emotionally charged are all areas where System 1 is likely to make mistakes. In these moments, you must learn not to trust your gut feeling. Your gut is just System 1 offering its first, easiest, and often flawed story. Second, deliberately engage System 2. The single most effective technique for this is simply to slow down. Before making a significant decision, pause. Ask yourself, what information might I be missing? What is an alternative explanation for this situation? Am I falling for a simple story when the reality is more complex? Force yourself to play devil's advocate against your own initial intuition. Create checklists for important, repeatable decisions. Checklists are a powerful tool because they force your lazy System 2 to pay attention to details it would otherwise gloss over. Third, manage your mental energy. Protect your System 2. Recognize that you have a limited budget of attention and self-control each day. Schedule your most important analytical tasks for times when you are fresh and focused. When you feel your cognitive resources dwindling, be extra cautious about the decisions you make. Defer important choices until you have had time to rest and recharge. Understanding this dual-process brain is like being given the owner's manual for your mind. You are not a single, unified, rational being. You are a complex partnership between an automatic, impulsive storyteller and a lazy but capable logician. By learning to recognize who is speaking, you can begin to question the stories you tell yourself, engage your deeper reasoning when it matters most, and ultimately make wiser, better choices that align with your long-term goals. This is the foundation upon which all the other lessons of this book are built. Chapter 2. Heuristics and Biases, the mental shortcuts that deceive you. In the last chapter, we met the two characters in our mind, the fast, intuitive System 1 and the slow, lazy System 2. We learned that System 1 is constantly feeding impressions and suggestions to System 2, which often just accepts them without question. Now, we pull back the curtain to reveal exactly how System 1 creates these instant judgments. How does it answer complex questions so quickly and effortlessly? The answer is that it cheats. It doesn't answer the hard question you ask it. Instead, it secretly substitutes that question with an easier one and answers that instead. These substitutions are known as heuristics. Heuristics are mental shortcuts, or rules of thumb, that allow us to navigate the world with incredible efficiency. They are the brain's equivalent of taking a well-trodden path through a forest instead of hacking through the dense undergrowth with a machete. 95% of the time, these paths get us where we need to go. But the other 5% of the time, they lead us into predictable, systematic traps. These traps, these consistent patterns of error, are known as cognitive biases. This chapter is a journey into the cognitive minefield of your own mind. We will explore the 3 most powerful heuristics that shape your thinking, often without your awareness. Mastering this knowledge is like being given a map and a compass to navigate that minefield safely. Let's begin with one of the most pervasive forces in human decision-making, the anchoring effect. The anchoring effect describes our tendency to be heavily influenced by the first piece of information we are given, the anchor, when making a decision. Once an anchor is set, our mind involuntarily clings to it, and all subsequent judgments, estimates, and negotiations are biased toward that initial value. Our System 2 is supposed to adjust away from the anchor, but it's a lazy controller. The adjustment is almost always insufficient. Kahneman and Tversky demonstrated this with a startlingly simple experiment. They would spin a wheel of fortune, rigged to land on either 10 or 65. After the wheel was spun, they asked participants 2 questions. First, is the percentage of African nations in the United Nations higher or lower than the number on the wheel? Second, what is your best estimate of that percentage? The results were astonishing. The number on the wheel, which the participants knew was completely random and arbitrary, had a massive impact on their estimates. For the group that saw the number 10, their average estimate was 25%. For the group that saw the number 65, their average estimate was 45%. The random anchor didn't just nudge their answers, it dragged them powerfully in its direction. This is System 1 at work. It grasps for any available information to create a coherent starting point, and System 2 fails to do the hard work of questioning that starting point and adjusting far enough away from it. You might think this only applies to abstract questions, but anchoring is a dominant force in your daily life. It is the single most important tool in any negotiator's toolbox. When you are buying a car, the sticker price is a powerful anchor. Every price you consider after that will be viewed in relation to that initial number. A skilled salesperson will always start with a high price because it makes their eventual concession seem far more generous than it actually is. The same is true for salary negotiations. The first person to name a number establishes the frame for the entire conversation. Marketers are masters of anchoring. A sign in a supermarket that says, "Limit 12 cans per customer," is not there to restrict your purchasing. It's there to anchor you to the number 12, making you more likely to buy 8, 9, or 10 cans than the 2 or 3 you might have originally intended. When you see a watch priced at 50 on sale for 20, the original price serves as an anchor that makes the sale price seem like an incredible bargain, even if the watch was never intended to be sold at 50. So how do you defend yourself against this powerful bias? The first step, as always, is awareness. When you enter a negotiation, consciously identify the anchor. The second and most crucial step is to actively fight it by creating your own counter-anchor. Do not make a counteroffer based on their anchor. Instead, ignore their number entirely. Do your own research and formulate your own starting point based on objective facts. Before a salary negotiation, research industry standards. Before buying a house, look at the prices of comparable homes. By dropping your own anchor, you activate your System 2 and force the conversation into a new frame, one that you control. Next, let's explore a heuristic that dictates our perception of risk and danger. The availability heuristic. This heuristic is another of System 1's clever substitutions. When asked a difficult question like, statistically, how frequent is a particular event? System 1 substitutes it with an easier one. How easily can I think of an example of that event? Our judgment of probability is distorted by the ease with which examples come to mind. It's not about the number of examples you can recall, but the effortlessness of the recall. Think about the fear of flying versus the fear of driving. Statistically, you are monumentally more likely to die in a car crash on your way to the airport than in a plane crash. Yet, countless people feel a spike of anxiety during takeoff while feeling perfectly calm driving on the highway. Why? Because of availability. Plane crashes are rare, but when they happen, they are dramatic, catastrophic, and receive 24/7 media coverage. The images are vivid and easily recalled. Car crashes, while far more common, are routine and rarely make the national news. System 1's memory bank is filled with fiery, dramatic images of plane crashes, making them feel far more probable than they are. This heuristic governs our lives in countless ways. After a major earthquake is reported in the news, Sales of earthquake insurance in that region spike, only to decline again over the next few years as the memory fades. Managers conducting performance reviews often fall victim to availability, giving more weight to an employee's successes or failures in the weeks leading up to the review, simply because those events are more recent and easily recalled than performance from 6 months ago. This can lead to a dangerous societal phenomenon called an availability cascade. A minor news story about a potential risk, say, a rare side effect of a vaccine or a chemical leak, gets picked up and sensationalized. This creates a wave of public concern. As people start talking about it, the story becomes even more available in the public consciousness. This heightened concern leads to more media coverage, which in turn amplifies the public's fear. A feedback loop is created where a relatively minor risk can snowball into a major public panic, leading to misallocation of resources and poor policy decisions. The fear is driven not by data, but by the ever-increasing ease of recalling the story. The antidote to the availability heuristic is discipline. It requires you to distrust the ease of your own memory and actively engage System 2. When assessing a risk, force yourself to look beyond vivid anecdotes and search for the statistical base rates. Ask not, "Can I think of an example?" but rather, "What do the numbers say?" Resisting this bias means building the habit of seeking out objective data, especially when your gut is screaming that something is dangerous or common. Finally, we arrive at what is arguably the most complex and consequential heuristic, the representativeness heuristic. This is System 1's deep-seated love for stereotypes. When we use this heuristic, we judge the probability that an object or person belongs to a particular category based on how much they resemble or represent the stereotype of that category. Once again, we substitute a hard statistical question with an easy question of similarity. And in doing so, we often completely ignore the most important piece of information: the base rates. Kahneman's most famous example involves a fictional individual named Tom W. Participants were given a detailed personality sketch of Tom. He is of high intelligence, though lacking in true creativity. He has a need for order and clarity, and for neat and tidy systems in which every detail finds its appropriate place. His writing is rather dull and mechanical, and he shows little sympathy for other people. The participants were then asked to rank 9 academic fields, like computer science, humanities, law, and library science, by the likelihood that Tom W. is a student in that field. Overwhelmingly, people ranked library science high on the list, because the description of Tom perfectly matches the stereotype of a librarian. But this is a grave statistical error. They failed to consider the base rate. There are vastly more students in humanities or computer science than there are in library science. The statistical probability of Tom being a library science student is very low, regardless of his personality. By focusing on the representation, the stereotype, they ignored the probability, the base rate. This leads to another profound error called the conjunction fallacy, which reveals the battle between plausibility and probability. Consider this famous problem. Linda is 31 years old, single, outspoken, and very bright. She majored in philosophy. As a student, she was deeply concerned with issues of discrimination and social justice, and also participated in anti-nuclear demonstrations. Now, which of these two alternatives is more probable? Linda is a bank teller. Linda is a bank teller and is active in the feminist movement. A staggering 85% of undergraduate students choose option 2. But think about it logically. It is a mathematical impossibility. The set of feminist bank tellers is a subset of the larger set of bank tellers. Every feminist bank teller is, by definition, a bank teller. Therefore, it is always more probable that Linda is a bank teller than it is that she is a bank teller and a feminist. So, why do we get it so wrong? Because option 2 tells a better, more coherent story. The detail about her being active in the feminist movement fits perfectly with the description of her personality. System 1 doesn't care about logic or probability. It cares about plausibility. It sees a rich, representative story and shouts, "Yes, that's the one." System 2, which is capable of understanding the logic of sets, is too lazy to intervene and correct the error. We sacrifice logic for a good story. The lesson here is profound. Adding detail to a scenario can make it more persuasive and plausible, but it also makes it less probable. Whenever you are presented with a detailed, compelling narrative, whether from a financial advisor predicting a specific market outcome, a politician outlining a very particular future, or a lawyer telling a jury a detailed story, your System 1 will be drawn to it. Your defense is to activate System 2 and ask the hard questions. What is the base rate? Does this story rely on stereotypes? Is this detailed scenario actually less probable than a simpler, more general outcome? These 3 heuristics, anchoring, availability, and representativeness, are the invisible architects of so much of our judgment. They are the reason we miscalculate risk, make poor financial decisions, and fall for stereotypes. They are not minor quirks. They are fundamental features of our cognitive machinery. The goal is not, and cannot be, to eliminate them. They are essential for navigating our complex world. The goal is to recognize them, to understand their power, and to know when to pause, slow down, and fire up the logical, effortful engine of System 2. By doing so, you can move from being a pawn in your mind's game to becoming its thoughtful strategist. Chapter 3. Overconfidence, the illusion of knowing. In our journey so far, we've met the impulsive System 1 and the lazy System 2. We've uncovered System 1's secret weapons, the heuristics of anchoring, availability, and representativeness. We've seen how these mental shortcuts create a quick, coherent, and often deeply flawed picture of reality. But this process has a dangerous and seductive side effect. The stories that System 1 creates, because they are simple and coherent, come with an accompanying feeling, a profound sense of confidence. This chapter is about that feeling. It's an exploration of one of the most potent and consistent biases in human judgment, our tendency to be wildly overconfident. The core lesson is this: your feeling of confidence is not a rational assessment of how likely you are to be right. It is a reflection of the coherence of the story your mind has managed to construct, based on the limited, and often biased, information available to it. We are all masters at fooling ourselves, and the primary tool we use is the illusion of knowing more than we actually do. Let's begin with how we fool ourselves about the past, through a bias known as the illusion of understanding, or hindsight bias. This is the pervasive "I knew it all along" effect. After an event has occurred, our minds immediately and effortlessly begin to weave a narrative of causality that makes the outcome feel inevitable and predictable. We can no longer accurately reconstruct our previous state of ignorance or uncertainty. The surprise of the event is erased, replaced by a false sense of foresight. Think about any major world event: a financial crisis, a political upset, a technological breakthrough. Before the event, the future is a fog of infinite possibilities. After the event, the past seems like a clear, straight line leading directly to that outcome. After the 2008 financial collapse, 1,000 commentators appeared to explain precisely why it was an inevitable consequence of subprime lending and deregulation. Yet, in 2006, these same experts were almost universally blind to the impending catastrophe. Hindsight bias creates a world that appears far more simple, understandable, and predictable than it actually is. This isn't just about world events, it's deeply personal. When a business venture you were skeptical about succeeds, you might think, "I knew it had potential." If it fails, you think, "I saw the warning signs from the start." You are rewriting your own history to match the outcome, creating a story where you were far more prescient than you actually were. The danger of hindsight bias is that it's a terrible teacher. It prevents us from learning the right lessons. Because we believe the world is more predictable than it is, we learn to trust our flawed intuitions. It also leads to profound unfairness. We blame decision-makers, CEOs, presidents, doctors, for failing to see the obvious signs of a disaster, when in fact the signs were only obvious in retrospect. We evaluate the quality of a decision not by whether the process was sound, but by whether the outcome happened to be good. This rewards reckless risk-takers who get lucky and punishes thoughtful leaders who suffer an unlucky break, creating a culture of fear and risk aversion. This illusion of understanding the past gives rise to an even more dangerous illusion, that we can accurately predict the future. This is the illusion of validity. This is our unwarranted confidence in our own judgments and predictions, especially in complex and unpredictable domains. Kahneman shares a powerful personal story from his time in the Israeli army, where he was tasked with evaluating candidates for officer training. He and his colleagues would observe candidates in grueling team exercises and then, with great confidence, predict who would succeed as a leader. The confidence came from the rich, coherent story they would build about each candidate's personality. Later, they received feedback on the accuracy of their predictions. The result? Their predictions were utterly worthless, no better than random guessing. What's shocking is that even after knowing this, the feeling of confidence returned with the very next candidate. Their system one would craft another compelling story, and the feeling of "this one is a future star" was irresistible, even when their system two knew that the feeling was an illusion. This illusion is rampant in the world of expert punditry. Political and financial experts make their living by appearing on television and making bold, confident predictions about elections, market movements, and geopolitical events. The psychologist Philip Tetlock conducted a landmark multi-decade study of these expert predictions. He collected tens of thousands of forecasts from hundreds of experts. The result was a stunning indictment of the pundit industry. The experts' predictions were, on average, barely better than chance. In fact, they were often worse than simple algorithms. And Tetlock discovered a disturbing correlation. The more famous and confident the expert, the less accurate their predictions tended to be. Their fame came from their storytelling ability, not their foresight. Confidence, then, is a poor indicator of accuracy. So, when can we trust expert intuition? Kahneman provides a clear framework. True expert intuition is not magic. It's a form of highly developed pattern recognition performed by System 1. It can only be developed under two specific conditions: a predictable high-validity environment. The domain must have underlying rules and regularities, an opportunity for prolonged practice with clear and rapid feedback. The expert must be able to make many predictions and quickly learn if they were right or wrong. Think of a chess master, a firefighter, or an anesthesiologist. Chess has rigid rules. Fires, while chaotic, obey the laws of physics. The human body responds to anesthesia, in predictable ways. In these fields, years of practice with immediate feedback allow System 1 to recognize complex patterns and develop reliable intuitions. But in a low-validity environment, like the stock market or long-term politics, there are too many variables, and feedback is slow and ambiguous. In these fields, a confident gut feeling is often nothing more than the illusion of validity. The antidote is humility and a reliance on simple statistics and algorithms, which have been proven time and again to outperform human intuition in these domains. This leads us to one of the most specific and damaging forms of overconfidence: the planning fallacy. The planning fallacy is our universal tendency to underestimate the time, costs, and risks of future endeavors, while simultaneously overestimating their benefits. It is a product of taking the inside view. When we plan a project, whether it's a kitchen renovation, writing a book, or launching a new product, we focus on our specific circumstances. We imagine a clear path to success, drawing on our own best-case scenarios and abilities. Our System 1 crafts a beautiful, optimistic story of how everything will go according to plan. What we fail to do is take the outside view. The outside view ignores the details of our own project and instead asks a simple question: what happened when other people tried to do this? It looks for the statistics of a reference class of similar projects. This is an unnatural act. It requires engaging our lazy system, too, to find and analyze data that might contradict our cheerful story. The world is littered with the monuments of the planning fallacy. The Sydney Opera House was planned to be completed in 1963 for $7 million. It was finished in 1973 for $102 million, an overrun of more than 400%. A 2005 study of major construction projects found that 9 out of 10 had cost overruns. This isn't because the planners are incompetent, it's because they are human. They fall in love with their plan and fail to look at the sobering statistics of reality. The cure is to deliberately adopt the outside view, a technique known as reference class forecasting. Before embarking on any major plan, you must discipline yourself to go through these steps. Identify a reference class. Find a group of past projects that are similar to yours. Obtain the statistics. Research the outcomes of that reference class. What was the average cost overrun? What was the average delay? How many of them failed completely? Make a prediction. Use this statistical base rate as the anchor for your own prediction. You may have good reasons to believe you'll do better than average, but the base rate should be your starting point, not your optimistic plan. Finally, all these biases are fueled by a fundamental engine in our psychology: the optimism bias. Most of us go through life with a generally optimistic view. We believe we are more skilled, more intelligent, and more attractive than the average person. We also believe we are less likely than others to experience negative events like getting sick, being in an accident, or getting divorced. This is not a conscious belief. It's a deep-seated bias woven into our System 1. This optimism is a double-edged sword. On one hand, it is the engine of progress and resilience. Entrepreneurs who start businesses against overwhelming odds are optimists. Inventors who toil for years on a breakthrough are optimists. Leaders who inspire people to achieve great things are optimists. Optimism protects us from the despair that a purely rational look at the odds might produce. On the other hand, this same optimism leads us to take foolish risks. We underestimate our competitors. We take on too much debt, and we fail to plan for the worst-case scenario because, in our minds, it simply won't happen to us. So, how can we harness the power of optimism while protecting ourselves from its dangers? The psychologist Gary Klein developed a brilliant technique called the pre-mortem. It is the perfect antidote to the kind of groupthink and overconfidence that often surrounds a major project. The process is simple. Before a decision is finalized, the team is gathered and asked to imagine that it is 1 year in the future, and the project has failed completely. It's been an unmitigated disaster. Each member of the team then has to take 5 minutes to write a brief history of that failure. This simple exercise is incredibly powerful. It legitimizes doubt and dissent. It breaks the spell of optimistic conformity. It forces everyone to switch from the inside view to a potential outside view, searching for threats and weaknesses that were overlooked in the initial wave of enthusiasm. It channels our narrative-making abilities toward prudence instead of overconfidence. The journey through this chapter teaches us a humbling lesson. Our minds are not designed for statistical accuracy. They are designed for telling coherent stories. And these stories create a feeling of confidence that is often a dangerous illusion. By understanding hindsight bias, the limits of expert intuition, the planning fallacy, and the power of optimism, we can begin to introduce discipline into our thinking. We can learn to doubt our certainty, to seek out the statistics, to consider the outside view, and to plan for failure. The goal isn't to become a pessimist, but to become a wise and prepared optimist, someone who hopes for the best, but has the clarity and courage to prepare for the rest. Chapter 4. Choices and Prospect Theory. Why losses hurt more than gains feel good. We have journeyed through the landscape of the human mind, discovering the impulsive system 1, the lazy system 2, our deceptive mental shortcuts, and our profound overconfidence. Now we arrive at the summit of this intellectual exploration, the very nature of choice itself. For centuries, the dominant model of human nature in economics and the social sciences was that of the rational agent, or econ. This creature makes decisions based on pure logic, calculating the expected utility of every option to maximize its own self-interest. Daniel Kahneman and Amos Tversky, through decades of brilliant experiments, proved that this rational agent is a myth. We are not econs. We are humans. Our choices are not driven by cold calculation, but by emotion, context, and a powerful, deeply ingrained psychological machinery. The theory that describes this machinery, the work that won Kahneman the Nobel Prize, is called prospect theory. It is a revolutionary map of how we actually make decisions, especially when faced with risk and uncertainty. To understand prospect theory, we must first discard the idea that we evaluate choices in terms of absolute outcomes. Instead, prospect theory is built on 3 foundational pillars that govern our perception of value. The first pillar is the concept of a reference point. Traditional economic theory assumes you care about your absolute level of wealth. If you have 1 million, you should be equally happy regardless of how you got there. Prospect theory shows this is nonsense. Our brains do not process absolute states. They process changes from a reference point. Imagine 2 people, Anne and Ben. Anne's wealth goes from 4 million to 3 million. Ben's wealth goes from 1 million to 1.1 million. Who is happier? Objectively, Anne is far wealthier. But psychologically, Ben is ecstatic, while Anne is devastated. Anne is experiencing a painful loss from her reference point of 4 million, while Ben is experiencing a pleasant gain from his reference point of 1 million. Your current state, your expectations, and the status quo all combine to form your reference point. and every outcome is coded by your brain as either a gain or a loss relative to that point. This simple idea completely upends classical economics. The second pillar is diminishing sensitivity. The subjective difference between gaining 0 and 100 is huge. The pleasure is palpable. But the difference between gaining 1, 0 and 1, 100 is much smaller. The same 100 gain feels less significant when added to a larger amount. The same principle applies to losses. The pain of losing the first 100 hurts much more than the pain of going from a loss of 1, 0 to a loss of 1, 100. Our emotional response to changes in wealth is not linear. It follows a curve of diminishing returns for both gains and losses. This explains why we are more sensitive to changes near our reference point and less sensitive to changes far from it. The third and most powerful pillar is loss aversion. This is the emotional engine of prospect theory. For most people, losses loom about twice as large as corresponding gains. The pain you feel from losing 100 is roughly twice as intense as the pleasure you feel from gaining 100. Your brain is wired with a powerful, asymmetric response to wins and losses. This is a relic of our evolutionary past, where survival often depended more on avoiding threats, losses, than on securing opportunities, gains. A single major loss like being eaten by a predator could eliminate you from the gene pool entirely, whereas a missed gain was just a missed opportunity. To feel this in your gut, consider this simple bet. I offer you a coin toss. Heads, you win 150. Tails, you lose 100. Do you take the bet? For most people, the answer is a firm no. Even though the potential gain is 50% larger than the potential loss, the fear of losing that 100 psychologically outweighs the allure of winning 150. For most people, the potential gain needs to be at least double the potential loss before they will even consider such a gamble. This single principle of loss aversion explains an enormous range of human behaviors, from our inherent conservatism and preference for the status quo to our reluctance to sell losing stocks. When you combine these three pillars' reference points, diminishing sensitivity and loss aversion, you get a powerful predictive model of human choice called the fourfold pattern. This pattern explains how our attitude toward risk systematically changes depending on the probability of an outcome and whether we are facing a gain or a loss. Let's break it down quadrant by quadrant. High probability gains, e.g., a 95% chance to win 10-0. In this situation, we become risk-averse. The reference point is the near certainty of winning. The small 5% chance of getting nothing is coded as a catastrophic loss. We fear this disappointment so much that we are willing to accept a sure thing that is less than the expected value. For instance, taking a guaranteed 9-400 to eliminate the risk. This is the psychology of locking in a win. Low probability gains, e.g., a 5% chance to win 10-0. Here, we become risk-seeking. The prospect of a huge gain is so alluring that we overweight this tiny probability. We are willing to pay more than the statistical expected value, 500 in this case, for the chance, however small, of transforming our lives. This is the psychology of the lottery. High probability losses, e.g., a 95% chance to lose 10-0. This is where things get truly irrational. Faced with a near certain loss, we become risk-seeking. The sure loss of 9-500 is incredibly painful. We are so desperate to avoid this pain that we will take a terrible gamble, like taking on a 5% chance of losing nothing, but a 95% chance of losing 10-0, just for the hope of escaping the loss. This explains why failing companies take on bet the farm risks, and why gamblers in a deep hole double down on their bets. They are not hoping for a gain, they are desperately hoping to undo a certain loss. Low probability losses, e.g., a 5% chance to lose 10-0. Finally, in this quadrant, we become risk-averse again. We overweight the small probability of a catastrophic loss. The fear of this potential disaster is so great that we are willing to pay a premium to eliminate the risk entirely. This is the psychology of the insurance industry. We happily pay a certain small loss, the insurance premium, to protect ourselves from the small chance of a devastatingly large loss. This fourfold pattern reveals the inconsistency of our choices. We are not consistently risk-averse or risk-seeking. Our risk posture is a complex dance determined by the emotional forces of hope and fear, mapped onto the domains of gains and losses. These principles manifest in several powerful real-world biases. One is the endowment effect. The moment you own something, it becomes more valuable to you. Why? Because giving it up is now a loss, and loss aversion kicks in. In a classic experiment, half the participants are given a coffee mug. They are then asked to name the price at which they would sell it. The other half, who did not receive a mug, are asked the price they would be willing to pay for one. Consistently, the sellers demand about twice as much as the buyers are willing to offer. The object is the same, but its value is transformed by ownership. The pain of losing the mug is greater than the pleasure of acquiring it. Perhaps the most stunning demonstration of prospect theory is the power of framing effects. The way a problem is described or framed can dramatically reverse our choices, even when the underlying outcomes are identical. Consider the famous Asian disease problem. Imagine the U.S. is preparing for the outbreak of an unusual Asian disease, which is expected to kill 600 people. Two alternative programs to combat the disease have been proposed. First frame, phrased in terms of gains. If Program A is adopted, 200 people will be saved. If Program B is adopted, there is a 1-3 probability that 600 people will be saved, and a 2-3 probability that no people will be saved. In this frame, the vast majority of people choose Program A. They are in the domain of gains, so they become risk-averse and lock in the sure thing. Second frame, phrased in terms of losses. If Program C is adopted, 400 people will die. If Program D is adopted, there is a 1-3 probability that nobody will die, and a 2-3 probability that 600 people will die. Now, the majority of people choose Program D. Why? Because the problem is framed in terms of losses. A sure loss of 400 lives is psychologically unbearable, so they become risk-seeking and take the gamble. Look closely. Program A and C are identical. Program B and D are identical. The only thing that changed was the language saved versus died. This single experiment shatters the notion of the rational agent. Our choices are not based on objective reality, but on our subjective, emotional reaction to the description of that reality. This leads us to the sunk cost fallacy. Because losses are so painful, we are deeply reluctant to accept them. When we have invested resources, money, time, effort into something that is failing, we should logically cut our losses and move on. But that would mean realizing a painful loss. To avoid that pain, we often throw good money after bad, investing even more in the hope of turning the project around. We stay in a bad relationship because we've already invested years in it. We sit through a terrible movie because we paid for the ticket. We hold on to a losing stock, hoping it will come back to even, instead of reallocating that money to a better investment. We are making decisions, not based on the future prospects, but on a desperate attempt to undo the losses of the past. Prospect theory provides us with a profound, if humbling, portrait of human choice. We are not logical econs, but emotional humans, guided by reference points, terrified of loss, and easily swayed by the frame of a problem. The lesson is not to try and become a perfect econ. That's impossible. The lesson is to become aware of the human operating inside you. When you face a significant choice, ask yourself these questions. What is my reference point? Is it the right one? How is this choice framed? Can I reframe it in a different way? Is my fear of a loss driving me to take a foolish risk, or is my desire to lock in a gain making me too conservative? By understanding the predictable irrationality of your own mind, you can introduce a crucial moment of reflection. You can engage your system 2 to challenge the intuitive, emotional answer of your system 1. And in that moment of reflection, you can find the wisdom to make a better choice. Conclusion. We have traveled deep into the intricate landscape of the human mind. We began this journey by meeting the two characters that direct our thoughts, the fast, intuitive, and often impulsive System 1, and the slow, deliberate, and often lazy System 2. We witnessed the constant, quiet struggle between them, the autopilot versus the pilot, the storyteller versus the scientist. We then pulled back the curtain on System 1's box of tricks, discovering the heuristics it uses to construct a quick and coherent version of reality. We saw how the anchoring effect tethers our judgment to irrelevant numbers, how the availability heuristic makes us mistake the vividness of our memory for the frequency of an event, and how the representativeness heuristic leads us to favor a good story over cold, hard probability. We learned that a dangerous side effect of this smooth mental storytelling is a profound overconfidence. We saw how hindsight bias tricks us into believing the past was predictable, how the illusion of validity grants us unearned faith in our ability to see the future, and how the planning fallacy seduces us into wildly optimistic plans. We discovered that our confidence is merely a feeling, a measure of a story's coherence, not a guarantee of its truth. Finally, we dismantled the myth of the rational decision-maker with the revolutionary insights of prospect theory. We learned that our choices are not based on absolute value, but on the emotional experience of gains and losses relative to a reference point. And we confronted the most powerful force in our decisions: our deep, visceral loss aversion. The fact that the pain of a loss is twice as powerful as the pleasure of an equivalent gain. So, what are we to do with this knowledge? It can feel unsettling, even humbling, to realize how much of our thinking is on autopilot and how easily we are led astray. But this is not a counsel of despair. It is a message of profound empowerment. The single greatest gift Daniel Kahneman gives us is a richer, more precise language to diagnose and discuss the patterns of our own thinking. Before, you might have had a vague feeling that a decision was off. Now, you can identify the specific cognitive machinery at work. You can recognize the pull of an anchor in a negotiation. You can spot the planning fallacy in a team meeting. You can see how framing a choice in terms of losses is making you and others irrationally risk-seeking. This vocabulary is a tool. It allows you to move the conversation from one of personal blame, that was a stupid idea, to one of objective process. I think we might be falling victim to the optimism bias here. Let's try a pre-mortem. It gives you a framework for challenging not only the thinking of others, but, more importantly, your own. The ultimate call to action from thinking, fast and slow, is to cultivate a new habit of mind, the habit of slowing down. The goal is not to eliminate System 1 that would be impossible and undesirable. Our intuition is what allows us to navigate the vast complexity of daily life. The goal is to learn to recognize the cognitive minefields, the high-stakes decisions, the emotionally charged situations, the moments when you are tired or depleted, and in those moments, to deliberately engage the effortful, analytical power of System 2. It's about having the wisdom to question your own certainties. It's about developing the discipline to seek out the outside view when your inside view is too rosy. It's about understanding that the key to better decisions is not just better information, but a better process for thinking about that information. By understanding the glitches in our own minds, we are not diminished. We are elevated. We are given the ability to step outside of our automatic programming, to move from being a character in the play to becoming its thoughtful director. The lessons of this book are a gift, a map to a wiser, more deliberate, and more effective way of being. Thank you for joining us at Summary in 15 minutes. Now, go forward, and when it matters most, dare to think slowly,